Hi everyone, my name is Kelly and I'll be sharing my birth story of my second son, Shiloh, with you. The purpose of this video or voice recording is to share my birth experience to those who are interested in hearing my birth story and for those who ask me to share it. I normally would not do something like this, but I felt that I need to share my testimony and give God all the glory and the honor for His provision, His mercy, and His support through this whole journey. I will also share some tips that I found were vital during my labor and delivery that made me love my birth experience. I also hope to curb some false ideas about a normal delivery and encourage you, if you are expecting at this stage, to just go for it. It is absolutely possible to have an awesome birth experience and to do it with the least pain possible. So, let's get into my experience and why I say I loved my birth. So the birth date was 23 August 2024, 23:56. His height was 52 centimeters and he weighed 3.72 kilograms. Let me start at the beginning, where I thought things are progressing and my labor was at hand. The night of 8 August, I was 39 weeks and 4 days pregnant. At around 7:30 at night, I felt contractions coming on. They were evenly spaced, about 10 minutes apart. The contractions sometimes increased in intensity. I thought, tonight is the night. We went to bed around 10 o'clock to get some sleep. Through the night, some contractions were strong, and I struggled to sleep, thinking that I might hold my baby in my arms in just a few hours. I let my midwife at Midwife's Exclusive know. Her name was Celeste. I let her know around about 12 o'clock at night. Then the anticlimax struck. During the night, they just stopped. I had what was called prodromal labor, or fake labor. A few days passed, and I had another night of this fake labor. Getting my hopes up, I started timing my contractions, which yet again stopped during the night while we were sleeping. Another few days passed, and yet again another fake labor started. But this time, I did not time my contractions, so I would not get my hopes up again and then be disappointed again. Soon, for the third time, the contractions passed again. Fast forward a bit, on 18 August, I reached the 41-week mark. Keep in mind that I did do a lot of things to try to induce labor naturally from around 40 weeks. I did things like I ate my dates from 36 weeks of pregnancy, although this does not induce labor, but some research just shows that it helps soften your cervix and ripen your cervix for delivery. And there's an average of the people who did this, who ate their dates from 36 weeks, that they spend around 4 hours less in labor than a normal person that did not eat dates. But in any case, then I did the mile circuit once a day, which I still think is beneficial to get your baby into the correct positioning for birth. Then I did curb walking, I climbed stairs, I went for strolls around the block, I spent a lot of time on my birthing ball doing hip circles, bouncing, figure of eights. I did nipple stimulation. And then obviously the one that, that everyone recommends is intimacy to get things going. So on Monday, the 19th of August, I was 41 weeks in 1 day. And my midwife gave me a call to ask me to go see the gynae, just for a scan to make sure that my placenta, the blood flow in the cord, and the amniotic fluid is still fine. I arranged that I would only go to see the gynae on Wednesday, the 21st of August, to give Shiloh a chance to come. With Asher, that is my first son, the gynecologist at the time gave a very negative report around about this time when I was 41 weeks pregnant. Actually, he started giving negative reports around about 39 weeks, if I remember correctly. That gynae wanted to induce labor or do a C-section and placed a lot of pressure on me and my husband. But at the same time, the Holy Spirit told us otherwise. So long story short, I went into spontaneous labor at 41 weeks and 2 days with Asher, and he was born a normal, healthy little boy through the Lord's grace and provision. Therefore, in this time around with Shiloh, my mind was a battlefield and a war zone. I cried out to the Lord a lot when I felt emotional and discouraged. Thoughts like, will this baby ever come? Will I reach the 42-week mark and go for an induction? Will the gynae pressure me into going for an induction? What if I reach the 42-week mark? What then? What if we wait too long and Shiloh does not receive the correct nutrients from my placenta as I am overdue? What if, what if, what if? So the Lord picked me up in those places and gave me the inner peace that surpasses all understanding. I'm referring to Philippians 4:7 here. I also shared my thoughts with a family member and my husband, who also helped me get through it. In this time, there were a lot of people from church who were also walking this journey with me and praying with me in this season, which was also a huge blessing. Back to my gynae visit. So, Shiloh did not come before we had to see the gynae. In this time, we were truly seeking the Lord's face regarding the birth of Shiloh and what He wants for us. We stopped at the hospital and sat in the car for a few minutes before we went in to see the doctor. We prayed together and specifically prayed for those three things to be in perfect condition: the placenta, the blood flow in the cord, and the amniotic fluid. A small part of me thought the gynae will suggest an induction because I was already 41 weeks and 3 days pregnant when I went to see him. So, after praying, we went in and to see him. They monitored Shiloh's heartbeat, which was perfect. Then we went in for the scan. The doctor started the scan, and I was praying in tongues in my head and my spirit the whole time he did the scan. And then he said, that is why he's not coming down. He's a bit high in your pelvis still. And then shortly after that, he confirmed what we were praying for, and he said, your placenta is working like a dream. My heart leaped for joy, and it felt like a huge mountain was lifted off my shoulders. I praised the Lord in my spirit and heart for His never-ending provision. It was like the 2 out of the 12 spies who visited the Promised Land and gave a good report. He also phoned my midwife and told her that my placenta did not look like a 41-week placenta, which is just amazing. The next day, the Thursday, the 22nd of August, I was 41 weeks and 4 days pregnant. I went to see my midwife again. The plan was to do a sweep to try to see if it'll help labor to begin. So what they basically do with a sweep is they just separate the membranes of the amniotic sac from your cervix. It is not painful. Well, it can be a bit uncomfortable, but I would not describe it as painful. So just keep that in mind. So that morning, in my quiet time, I asked the Lord if He wanted me to do the sweep. I had an uncomfortable feeling about it, and Kyle was also a bit uneasy about it. I then saw Celeste, my midwife, and I explained to her that I did not want to do the sweep, as this is what I felt in my quiet time. She responded, if the Lord told you no, then you should not do it. She is also a fellow believer in Christ and handpicked by God to assist my birth. We sat in the appointment and shared some birth testimonies before she hooked me up to the machine, which listens to the heartbeat of the baby and also measures my contractions. Shiloh's heartbeat was perfect. The machine indicated that my uterus is irritated and ready for birth. I also asked her to check if I was at least dilated a bit to see if there's some progress or not. She checked and gave me a look and said, you are already 4 centimeters dilated. She also indicated that his head is still a bit higher up than where it should be when you go into labor. She then said that we are just waiting for the contractions to start and that they will probably start that day or the day after, which is the Friday. Just on a side note, when she checked how far I was dilated, it was not painful at all. I remember when I was in the hospital with my first son's birth, when the nurses checked how far I was dilated, the pain was intense. But this time around, she was very gentle and there was no pain at all. So for those of you who fear this, just ask them to be gentle, and if you find it painful, just breathe through it calmly. It is really nothing to fear. I went home and my husband also joined me and did not go to work that Thursday and Friday. The Friday morning, I was 41 weeks and 5 days pregnant. I googled what the 4 centimeter dilated means and realized that some women walk like this for weeks before giving birth. Then the war in my mind started again. Again, I cried out to Abba Father to let Shiloh descend into my pelvis so that things can get going. The whole morning and early afternoon, my contractions were very quiet. Celeste then asked if we could see her that Saturday morning so that we can see the progress, but we rather opted for that Friday afternoon around 4, which is actually outside of her working hours, which was quite nice of her to help us that time. As a prophetic action, we packed the car with all of our bags and necessities, chargers, the car seat for Shiloh, toothbrushes, everything. And full of faith, we went to see her. We then got there. She hooked me up to the machine again, and everything seemed perfect. She checked how far I was dilated again, and I was around 4 to 5 centimeters. But now, his head was where it was supposed to be for labor to start. So very close or on my cervix. At this stage, I now had peace about doing the sweep, and Kyle was also comfortable with it, so she did the sweep. So we greeted her after our session, and she said, "We're not going to sleep tonight. See you later." So on our way back home from the midwife, I started to feel contractions. I did not tell Kyle about them, as I was so used to having the fake labor, and I wanted to be sure that this is the real thing. So as the night progressed, my contractions did as well. Finally, around 7, my contractions were 5 minutes apart and consistent, and did not decrease in intensity. I messaged Celeste, who, by the way, was on a date night with her husband, and she said that I should meet her at the birth house. We then gave Asher to Grandma and Grandpa to look after him and told him that we are going to fetch Baba Booty. An important principle to remember during your birth is the following. It's dove's eyes for Jesus. This means that you focus and actively put your mind on him and seek him and just focus on him during the whole process. A word that I received while I was in labor via a friend is the following, and it fits perfectly with the dove's eyes principle. She said, "He will keep you in his perfect shalom because your mind is on him." Shalom is a Hebrew word that means so much more than just peace. It also means safe, happy, friendly, welfare, health, prosperity, peace, and rest. So, I squeezed a comb, a barber's comb, in my hand while we were driving to the birth house to ease the pain of the contractions, which worked quite well. What the comb does, it blocks the pain pathway to the brain so that your brain focuses on the pain coming from your hand and the comb and not the contraction. I also used the breathing technique of deep abdominal breathing for 4 seconds and then out for 6. This is vital for a calmer and less painful labor, as when you are not calm and when you are fearful, the hormones in your body that promote labor is becoming suppressed. So it works like this. Imagine a horse giving birth in the wild. The labor goes well, but if a lion jumps up that wants to attack the horse is able to action the fight or flight response to run away and not give birth. The hormones, especially adrenaline, that is secreted in the fight or flight response, suppresses the hormones that promote labor, oxytocin, which is one of the main ones, and that can delay or even stop your labor from progressing. It is the same when you are in a stressful or fearful situation during labor. That is also why we chose to birth at the birth house, because of the calmness that was present there. It basically looks like a guest house, and they have everything there that, should something go wrong, they can stabilize you or your baby and then take you to the hospital via an ambulance. But yeah, that's just a side note. So, you are in good hands when you're there. So you need to be relaxed and calm throughout the whole labor and not fear any contraction or pain. If you work against your body in labor, it will be more painful and take longer. The scriptures are very clear about fear. For example, 1 John 4:18 says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out all fear." And then in 2 Timothy 1:7, it says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and self-discipline or self-control." If we look at the word self-discipline or self-control, depending on which translation you are using, we see that it means abilities that result in a calm, well-balanced mind and self-control. These are examples of scriptures that I concentrated on during my birth. So the Lord gives us literally a spirit of a calm, a well-balanced mind, so that we don't go into panic in these difficult situations, including birth. So we made our way into the birth house and into the room where I would give birth. Celeste checked how far I was dilated, and I was at 8 centimeters. At this stage, my contractions were uncomfortable, and I could, I would not describe it as painful. It was just uncomfortable. So to keep my mind busy, I wrote some scripture on a brown paper that I had posted on the wall. We listened to some gospel music, and I walked around the room to keep the progress of labor going. I spent some time on a birthing ball as well. Each time a contraction would come, I would get onto my bed, the bed, on my hands and knees, and my husband would perform a double hip squeeze, which provides counter pressure against the contractions. On the screen, you'll see how a double hip squeeze is performed. This worked quite well. While I was in laboring on, my midwife got everything ready in the background, like running the bath and making sure that we are as comfortable as can be. After 2 hours of laboring in the room, my midwife explained how they work with births at the birth house. They use a chart to track your progress. If you're not making enough progress in a certain amount of time, there is time for them to take action, and then if that action does not work, they'd rather transfer you to the hospital with an ambulance. At that point, I felt my contractions were regressing and actually moving further away from each other, and the intensity became less sometimes. So Celeste then checked my progress of how far I was dilated after the 2 hours, and I still was only at 8 centimeters dilated, and my baby had moved up a bit in my pelvis again as well. This is also when the backup midwife arrived, Heather Peterson, who happens to be the owner of the practice. They then discussed my options with me and said that they can try to break my water now to try to move things along, or we can go and climb some stairs for an hour and see if that helps. And if not, only then they'll break my water. So we discussed that we will climb the stairs. Kyle and I climbed the stairs for an hour. This seemed to help to get my contractions closer together again, about 2 minutes apart. And with every contraction, I would put my one leg on a higher step and then push down with my upper body to try to see if I can break my water myself, while Kyle did the double hip squeeze. My contractions at this point were strong, but the pain was not intense or unbearable. It was very bearable. After the hour was up, Celeste checked my progress, and I was now only at 9 centimeters dilated, which was too slow according to the chart that they use. This is also when Celeste noticed that Shiloh was a posterior or sunny side up baby. Interestingly, that day, on the Friday, I felt him turn around. I felt more kicks on my belly button, and that is an indication that your baby can be posterior or sunny side up. So the whole time through my pregnancy, I could feel him lying on the one side of my belly, which was fine. But the last day, I felt him turn around with his back facing my tummy. Well, no, his face was facing my tummy, so his back was against my spleen or my spine. So this also explained why my contractions were irregular and regressing at one stage and so on. But during the pushing phase, she said that she could feel how he was turning into the correct position. So, at that point of time, I was tired and I wanted things to progress. So at around 11:30 at night, we agreed for them to break my water. I knew that if they broke my water, the contractions will come quicker and be more intense, as I experienced this with my first son. And so the contractions did just that. It very quickly escalated into intense contractions, I would say within 3 minutes of the water breaking. With each contraction, I again would climb onto the bed and Kyle would do the double hip squeeze. This phase is also where it is vital to focus on your breathing, so you will be still and calm, and that is just what I did. So you will breathe in for 6 seconds, and then, you will breathe in for 4 and then 6 out. And it should be deep abdominal breathing. I also made some low-toned vocal sounds. Also important is that you do not tense up and make sounds like E or ah. A general rule is to keep your jaw loose, and then when you say E, your jaw is tight. And when you do this, your pelvic floor also tightens. And that makes it harder for your baby to come out. So the ideal sound that you want to go for is like a ooh sound. So I had about 3 contractions where the midwives were just in the other room. I then asked Carl to call them, as I knew that it was time. The midwives entered and I had a contraction where my body involuntarily started to push my baby out on its own. This is called the fetal ejection reflex. Here's just a tip for some women to consider. Some gynaes want you to start pushing when you're at 10 centimeter dilated. But this is not ideal because the fetal ejection reflex has not kicked in yet. So there will be a lot more pushing and harder pushing for mama. I also even heard a testimony where one woman said that she pushed at 10 centimeters dilated and then ruptured an artery in her face. So rather, just wait a few more minutes until your body is truly ready to push your baby out on its own. So after the 1 contraction was over, they helped me get into the bath that they had ready. As soon as I entered the water, I could feel the contractions, although strong, were less painful and uncomfortable. I even heard some people call the bath the midwife's epidural. I immediately went into a position where I was on my knees and hanging over the rim of the bath in front of me, as if I was on my knees praying alongside my bed. Also important at this stage is to position your feet wider than your knees, which opens up your pelvis to get your baby out more easily. Another tip is to please don't give birth on your back for the following reasons. This position does not allow your sacrum to rotate as easily to open the birth canal. Secondly, gravity is not able to assist you while you are laying on your back. Number 3, lying on your back can decrease the size of your pelvic opening, which makes it more difficult for baby to descend into the birth canal. This position also increases the pressure on your tailbone, which causes more pain and discomfort. There is an increased risk for tearing as well, as it does not allow your perineum to stretch as effectively as it could. And there are another few reasons as well. So what all of this means is that there will be a lot more pushing and a lot more work for the mother. Back to my story. In those moments, I've also focused on breathing, and when I forgot to breathe properly, the midwives reminded me to breathe. The ideal is that you do want to go for breathe out your baby. If I could describe how the contractions felt at that stage, is that at the start of the contraction there was pain, but as the contraction progressed, the pain subsided a bit, and then I just felt my uterus contract very strongly to push out my baby. And also note that the contractions do not get worse and worse, they stay about the same. I felt a burning sensation on my perineum, which is called the ring of fire. This actually helps you take a step back and prevent you from just pushing through and just pushing your baby out, and so it helps prevent tearing. Celeste was also supporting my perineum to reduce the chance of tearing. As the contractions continued after that, I still felt a burning sensation on my perineum as it was stretching. Heather talked me through it and said that I should focus on pushing into the area where the pain or the burning is coming from. And that way, I was making the most progress. Then, finally, Shiloh's head was out, and I heard my husband say, "Ah, look at his cute ears." And this motivated me a lot, as I knew that within the next contraction, it would be all over. He had the umbilical cord around his neck, which they just flipped off, and there was no concern about that. The last contraction came, and I felt his whole body just slide out smoothly. Celeste then passed him to me in between my legs, and I finally got my reward. I held my baby in my arms. This was an absolutely amazing feeling. All of the hard work paid off, and now I could rest. He was a bit lazy to breathe at first. His APGAR score at 1 minute was 4 out of 10, which is bad because he did not want to breathe. I prayed for him, and Carl also prayed silently, and just as they wanted to clamp the cord to put him on an oxygen mask that would have blown oxygen into his nose to get him to breathe, he gave a loud cry and took his first breath of life. The midwives left the room and gave us some time alone. Carl then spoke a blessing over Shiloh's life. After a few minutes, the midwives returned. We then waited for the cord to stop pulsating. This is called delayed cord clamping, very important to do this. And then Kyle had the honor of cutting his cord. Now, this was now time to get me out of the bath. They told Kyle to take off his t-shirt and take Shiloh so that they can have a bit of skin-to-skin contact. And they then helped me deliver the placenta and get me out of the bath. They helped me to the bed where I started to breastfeed. Celeste examined if I did, and I did. But before I want to continue, I just want to make it clear, this is nothing to fear. I did not even feel it when I did. You don't notice it at all. Nonetheless, she just stitched me up while I was focusing on trying to get Shiloh to feed. And then after Shiloh was done feeding, they took all the measurements that was needed. Interestingly, Heather gave us a tour of the placenta. His umbilical cord was approximately 60 centimeters, which was apparently quite long. She then also showed us where he laid against the placenta and so on. She also indicated that usually a 41-week placenta is grainy, but mine was not grainy at all. This is exactly what Carl and I prayed for in the car in front of the hospital. So all the honor and the glory to the Lord. He is the creator of life. They also helped me, they also have a wall of footprints of all the babies that are born in the birthhouse, and they also put Shiloh's footprint there. After all of this, they helped me to take a shower, and around about 2:30 in the morning, they helped us to go to the flat, that is what they call it, and we stayed there for the rest of the night. The next morning, they brought us breakfast in bed, which was quite a spoil. And then they also checked up on me and made sure that everything was fine, as well as checked up on Shiloh, making sure he is fine. After that, we went home and introduced Shiloh to Asher, which took it very well. He loves his Baba Booty, and we had a lovely restful day further. So to wrap up my recording, here are my key takeaways to facilitate a successful delivery and a birth that you will remember and love. Important, very important, dove's eyes for Jesus. Have no fear. Declare scripture. Breathe 4 in and 6 out. Remember the comb. Do not fight the contractions, and when in the pushing phase, you should push into the pain. Do not lie on your back in a stagnant position during your labor. This increases the pain of the contractions, so get up and get moving. Do not birth on your back, and remember to keep your feet wider than your knees when pushing. Do adequate research about labor beforehand to know what to expect. Remember the double hip squeeze. And lastly, and I would say one of the most important ones, listen to the Holy Spirit rather than what the doctor says. It is mind over matter. You can do this. You were built to birth by the Creator of life.